The winter wind howls along the Maine coast, carrying whispers of salt and secrets long buried. At the edge of the frozen harbor, a broken telegraph machine cracks to life, tapping out a message from nowhere. Lieutenant Ethan Cole, a Navy SEAL scarred by his past, follows the signal with his loyal dog Rex. The trail leads to a silent town and a missing girl whose voice once echoed through the static. But the message wasn't just a cry for help. It was a warning. Now, engines roar in the fog. Footsteps close in, and somewhere beneath the ice, something ancient begins to answer. Before we begin, tell us where you're watching from and subscribe for more stories of faith, courage, and the miracles God hides in the darkest places. The wind off the Atlantic carried the sting of salt and frost, sweeping across the frozen piers of Port Haven, a small coastal town buried under a white silence that even the gulls seemed afraid to disturb. Snow layered over the rusted cranes and silent boats like dust on forgotten bones. It was a world paused between tides and storms, and into that stillness rolled a black government SUV, headlights cutting through the mist. Inside sat Ethan Cole, 34, a Navy SEAL whose eyes had seen more dust, blood, and betrayal than he ever spoke of. His jawline was square and roughened by a few days' stubble, his dark blonde hair cropped military short. But his gaze, a cold gray blue, carried the wary distance of a man who trusted motion more than memory. He moved like someone trained to read danger in the smallest detail, the flutter of a curtain, the echo of a step. There was a restlessness to him, the kind born not from caffeine or nerves, but from too many nights replaying missions that refused to stay buried. In the passenger seat, Rex, a 6-year-old German shepherd, sat upright, muscles taut beneath a winter tactical harness marked K99 Nav Spec War. His coat was thick black and tan, his amber eyes sharp yet calm, scanning the blur of frozen harbor lights outside. A faint scar ran across his left shoulder, an old shrapnel wound from a mission gone wrong in Kandahar. Rex had been trained to detect explosives, but in truth, he was Ethan's last living connection to the team they'd lost 2 years ago. To anyone else, Rex was just a dog. To Ethan, he was the heartbeat that kept the silence from devouring him. As they approached the Port Haven checkpoint, the radio crackled. Echo 1, confirm position. Report any unusual frequency activity. Ethan pressed the mic. Copy that command. Arriving at coordinates. Signal anomaly still intermittent. Request extended observation window. The voice on the other end acknowledged briefly, then the static swallowed everything. The anomaly had been detected 3 nights earlier, short bursts of encrypted transmissions bouncing off the coastal radar grid, repeating every hour. At first, analysts thought it was a weather beacon malfunction, but the pattern matched classified naval comms, decommissioned decades ago. Someone, or something, was talking on a ghost channel. Ethan parked near the dockside warehouse, the kind of place where time had stopped in 1982, peeling paint, padlocked doors, and a smell of diesel and seaweed frozen in the air. He stepped out, snow crunching under his boots, his breath rising like smoke. Rex followed, nose low, tail stiff with attention. They made their way to the pier. The sound of the sea here wasn't waves, it was grinding ice, slow and cruel. Ethan knelt beside a rusted bollard, pulling a small receiver from his jacket. The monitor flickered, numbers cascading. There it is again, he murmured. The pattern, short, long, short, short, long, repeated. Morse code, definitely. But it didn't form any recognizable phrase. It was almost like coordinates. Rex gave a soft growl, head turning toward the fog that pressed against the end of the pier. Ethan followed his gaze. Through the mist, he saw faint lights flicker. 3, maybe 4 points, low to the water, vanishing as quickly as they appeared. "Easy, boy," he whispered, his gloved hand brushing Rex's neck. "Probably boys." But even as he said it, he knew boys didn't move like that. He scanned the area. The town itself lay quiet behind him, a scattering of wooden houses, their windows glowing faintly amber against the blue cold. Somewhere out there, behind one of those windows, someone might be awake, unaware that a classified signal was humming through their harbor. Ethan and Rex moved along the frozen dock. His boots left dark prints on the snow. The smell of fish and iron thickened. Halfway down the line of storage sheds, a door creaked. Ethan froze. Rex lowered himself to a crouch, ears flat. The door swung open just enough to reveal a figure. The man who stepped out was short and wiry, mid-50s, wearing a heavy wool coat and a cap pulled low. His beard was grizzled, his eyes the color of dirty snow. Tom Weaver, the harbor's night guard. He carried an old lantern that swayed like a heartbeat in the dark. "You're a long way from base, soldier," Tom rasped, his voice a blend of salt and whiskey. Ethan nodded. "Routine inspection. Got reports of signal interference." Tom squinted. "Interference, huh? Out here the only thing interfering is the wind. Ain't been no real radio work since the Coast Guard packed up." He leaned closer, eyeing Rex. "Fine-looking shepherd. Trained, I reckon?" "Best partner I've ever had," Ethan said simply. Tom's eyes softened for a second, then turned hard again. "Careful where you point your curiosity, officer. This town's got places that prefer to stay quiet." He turned back toward the shed, muttering, "Some ghosts don't like being called up again." Before Ethan could respond, a crackle burst from his handheld receiver. The signal had returned, stronger, faster. The numbers on his monitor went wild. Rex barked once, sharp and alert, facing the direction of the frozen pier's end. The sound echoed, swallowed by fog. Ethan raised his binoculars. For a fleeting moment, through the gray veil of snow, he saw movement, a silhouette crossing between 2 abandoned trawlers. Tall, purposeful, human. Then it was gone. He started forward, every sense alive. Rex strained at the leash, muscles quivering, nose tracking invisible scent trails in the frost. "Stay close," Ethan whispered. His heart thudded against the rhythm of the storm. He felt the pulse of something familiar yet wrong, like being back in a war zone without the clarity of enemy lines. When they reached the end of the dock, the fog parted just long enough to reveal a shape half submerged in ice, a metal buoy, old and dented, but humming faintly. Ethan crouched, brushing off the frost, revealing a small transmitter clamped beneath it, military-grade, encrypted, and active. His stomach dropped. "This isn't Coast Guard tech," he muttered. Then the device emitted a brief tone, 3 beeps, then silence. The receiver in his hand buzzed with interference. On its cracked display flashed a fragment of data. EM-04, alive, beacon, before cutting off completely. The snow thickened, swirling like smoke. Rex pressed closer, whining softly. Ethan stood scanning the water. The faint lights were gone. Only the sound of creaking ice remained, but he knew he wasn't alone. Someone had been here recently, someone who knew these signals better than he did. He reached for his comms to call it in, but the line was dead, static. Then, faintly, through the white noise, a whispering transmission bled through, low, mechanical, and human, Stop listening." The receiver went silent. Ethan looked down at Rex. The dog's ears were pricked, his body tense, staring into the fog as if seeing something Ethan couldn't. And in that frozen moment, beneath the howling wind, Ethan realized the storm wasn't the only thing moving in Port Haven tonight. The storm had passed by dawn, leaving behind a world dipped in silver and silence. The docks of Port Haven stretched under a pale gray sky, their wooden planks coated with thin ice that shimmered like glass. Ethan Cole hadn't slept. He sat inside his SUV parked near the abandoned trawlers, eyes fixed on the frozen water where the strange buoy had glowed only hours before. Beside him, Rex dozed lightly, his ears twitching at every sound, the low creak of metal, the moan of the tide trapped beneath ice. Ethan replayed the words over and over. Stop listening. The voice had been human, not automated, cold, calm, confident. Whoever sent it knew exactly who was on the other end. He checked his comms again, still dead. His instincts told him not to report in, not yet. Someone might already be monitoring the channel. He stepped out into the cold, the wind biting his face like shards of glass. The scent of salt mixed with machine oil and decay. Rex padded beside him, nose close to the ground, tracing invisible trails of scent that twisted through the snow. "Find it, buddy?" Ethan murmured. The dog stopped suddenly near a stack of fishing nets and barked once, sharp and low. Ethan knelt, brushed aside the snow, and found a fresh footprint, heavy, booted, too clean for a fisherman. It was headed toward the direction of the North Dock, an area that had been sealed off after a warehouse fire 5 years ago. The town was waking now. A few fishermen trudged toward their boats, shoulders hunched against the cold. A pair of gulls screamed overhead. Across the pier, the small diner flicked on its neon sign. Haven's Rest Cafe. Ethan and Rex crossed the street, the dog's paws leaving dark impressions in the frost. Inside, the diner smelled of coffee, burnt toast, and something faintly metallic, the scent of a place that survived more winters than it should have. Behind the counter stood Sarah Quinn, late 30s, tall and willowy, with auburn hair tied in a loose braid that fell over one shoulder. Her skin was pale from the cold, but her eyes were a deep, knowing green, the kind that had seen trouble but learned how to hide it behind small-town kindness. She moved with quiet efficiency, wiping down the counter, humming under her breath. "Morning," she said when she noticed Ethan. "You look like someone who hasn't slept since the last war." Ethan offered a half smile. "Something like that." He ordered black coffee. Rex settled at his feet, drawing curious glances from the only other customer, an old man with a flannel jacket and hands that shook slightly as he stirred his drink. "You with the Coast Guard?" Sarah asked casually, pouring coffee into a chipped mug. "Something close," Ethan replied, sipping the bitter heat. "You get many outsiders this time of year?" She shook her head. "Just storms and people trying to outrun them." Her voice softened. "You're looking for something, aren't you?" Ethan studied her. She didn't sound suspicious, just perceptive, like someone used to reading people before they spoke. "I'm tracking a signal. Came from somewhere near the harbor." Her hand froze for a fraction of a second before she set the pot down. "A signal?" He nodded. "Old military encryption. You ever notice anything strange around here? Lights offshore, visitors at odd hours." Sarah hesitated. Her eyes flicked toward the window where the gray ocean lay still as stone. "Sometimes, at night, I hear engines. No boats leaving, no boats coming in, but the sound carries under the fog. She glanced back at him. You should talk to Deputy Carter if you're asking questions like that. He does the night patrols, keeps track of who's moving in and out of town. Ethan thanked her, left some bills on the counter, and stepped back into the cold. He found Deputy Ray Carter an hour later at the edge of the North Dock, standing beside a patrol truck dusted with frost. Carter was in his early 40s, solidly built, with a square face, trimmed beard, and sharp blue eyes that missed little. His uniform was neat, despite the cold, but his jaw carried the fatigue of a man who'd seen too much for too long. A faint scar curved along his temple, the kind left by shrapnel or a bad decision. "Agent Cole, right?" Carter said when Ethan approached. "Sarah called ahead, said you were asking about signals." His tone was measured, not hostile, but cautious. "Just routine recon," Ethan said, "but I found something under the ice. Military-grade transmitter. Someone's using it." Carter frowned, rubbing the scar on his temple. 5 years back, we had a fire here at the North Dock. The official report called it faulty wiring, but I found shell casings in the debris. No one wanted to hear it. The folks here like their peace, even if it's built on lies. Ethan crouched by the frozen edge, examining the dark water beneath. "You think whoever started that fire is still around?" Carter's gaze drifted toward the distant warehouse roofs, their jagged silhouettes cutting the sky. "I think Port Haven's been holding its breath for a long time, waiting for something to crawl back out of the sea." Before Ethan could reply, Rex stiffened. The dog's nose pointed toward the end of the dock, body low and trembling with focus. "What is it?" Ethan whispered. Then he heard it too, a faint hum pulsing through the ice beneath their feet. They followed the sound to a half-collapsed boathouse at the far end of the pier. Inside, the air smelled of mildew and rust. Chains hung from the ceiling, swaying slightly though there was no wind. Rex sniffed along the walls, stopping near an overturned workbench. Ethan moved it aside, and there, hidden under a tarp, was another transmitter identical to the one they'd found the night before, still blinking faintly. Carter swore under his breath. "That's no weather. Equipment." Ethan knelt to examine it. "This one's active, but weaker." He tapped the casing. Inside, the faint echo of a mechanical click answered. "There's more of them out there, maybe a network." Rex barked once, facing the door. Footsteps echoed outside, fast, retreating. Ethan sprinted out, catching sight of a shadow slipping between two storage containers. He chased it through the narrow path, boots skidding on ice, until the figure turned. A flash of a hooded face, the glint of a knife. Ethan tackled him to the ground, the blade skittering across the dock. The man thrashed, eyes wild. His skin was pale, his cheeks wind-burned, his hair matted with snow. "Who sent you?" Ethan demanded. The man spat, trembling, eyes darting toward the fog-covered sea. "You shouldn't have listened," he hissed. "It's already awake." Before Ethan could press further, the man twisted violently, and something small clicked under his jacket. A flare of heat, then smoke. Ethan pulled back, covering his face as the man's body convulsed and went still. A thin trail of white vapor rose from his chest. Cyanide capsule. Suicide. Carter coughed, pulling his scarf over his mouth. "Jesus! Who the hell are these people?" Ethan looked at the transmitter still pulsing inside the boathouse, the fog outside thickening into something unnatural. "I don't know," he said softly, eyes narrowing, "but whatever's coming, it's not over the water." As the wind howled through the broken boards, Rex growled low, staring not at the sea but toward the inland hills, where a faint light flickered once, then vanished. Snow fell in slow, heavy curtains that blurred the world into shades of white and silence. Ethan Cole drove the SUV through the narrow back roads north of Port Haven, the tires crunching against packed ice. The fog from the sea had drifted inland overnight, turning the pine forest into a pale labyrinth. In the passenger seat, Rex sat rigid, ears twitching, nose close to the cracked window, breathing in the scent of salt and wood smoke. The suicide of the hooded stranger haunted Ethan. His last words, "It's already awake," echoed through every mile of road. What had he meant? And what was that flickering light on the hill that both he and Rex had seen? Deputy Carter had gone back to report to his precinct, leaving Ethan to trace the signal's inland source alone. The equipment back at the boathouse showed that the transmission pattern had shifted direction, no longer coming from the harbor, but from somewhere deeper within the forested outskirts of town. By dusk, Ethan reached the edge of an old fishing route, half buried under snowdrifts. His map marked a few scattered homesteads in the area, small cabins that survived off trapping and sea trade, but only one showed recent power readings, the Harper residence. The house sat isolated atop a rise overlooking the frozen inlet, its lights flickering dimly like a dying heartbeat. He parked, scanned the perimeter with his thermal monocular. Only one heat signature inside, human, motionless. He and Rex approached cautiously. The porch creaked under his boots, and before he could knock, the door opened a crack. A woman's voice, rough and cautious. "Who's there?" "Lieutenant Cole, U.S. Navy," Ethan replied evenly, keeping one hand raised. "I'm not here to cause trouble, ma'am. I'm investigating a communications disturbance in this area." The door opened wider. The woman before him looked to be in her early 40s, tall but slender, with the kind of weathered grace that comes from years of surviving hard winters. Helen Harper had long chestnut hair streaked with silver, tied back in a practical bun. Her skin was pale but flushed from the cold, and her gray-green eyes had the steady alertness of someone used to fixing problems before asking for help. She wore a thick wool sweater over faded jeans and an old Coast Guard jacket that looked 2 sizes too big. "Communications disturbance?" she repeated slowly. "You're a bit far from any command post, Lieutenant." "Signals don't care about boundaries," Ethan said, stepping inside when she nodded. The warmth of the small cabin wrapped around him, smelling of burning pine, coffee, and old books. The place was tidy but sparse, every object having a purpose. On a shelf above the mantel sat framed photos, a man in uniform smiling beside a teenage girl with bright eyes. Helen caught him looking. "My husband was a diver for the Navy, lost in a salvage accident off Rockport 8 years ago. Since then, it's just me, and, well, it used to be my daughter." There was a pause, heavy as the snow outside. "Used to be?" Ethan asked softly. Helen's gaze dropped to her hands. "Emily, 17, went missing 3 weeks ago after her shift at the harbor canteen. Sheriff said she probably ran off with some boy, but Emily wasn't like that. She loved the sea, hated the town." Her voice broke slightly. "The night she vanished, I heard something, like a hum from the cliffs. The next morning, there were footprints leading to the pier and tire tracks heading toward the hills." Ethan exchanged a look with Rex. The pieces were beginning to form a pattern, signals, dead transmitters, now a missing girl. "Can I look around outside?" Helen nodded. "Take the lantern by the door. Watch your step. Ground's uneven near the shed." Ethan and Rex circled the cabin. The cold gnawed through his gloves as he examined the snow. There, tire marks half buried under the new layer. The pattern matched military-grade off-road vehicles, the kind used for covert logistics. Near the shed, Rex stiffened, pawing at the snow, then digging furiously until something metallic glinted beneath. A radio transceiver, small, portable, its casing stamped with the same serial prefix as the devices from the docks. Ethan brushed the frost off, clicked it on, a faint pulse of static. Then 3 short bursts, 2 long, the same pattern. "Good work, partner," he murmured, but the satisfaction didn't last. The signal was being repeated, relayed. Someone was listening to him listen. Inside, Helen had started a pot of coffee. The lantern light flickered across her face, deepening the lines of exhaustion. "Anything out there?" she asked. Ethan placed the device on her table. "This was buried outside your shed." She stared at it as if it were a relic. That looks like something Emily had. She said she found it on the beach a few days before she disappeared. Thought it was some kind of walkie-talkie." Ethan's gut tightened. "Did she say where on the beach?" Helen nodded toward the east-facing window. "Near the old radio tower. It's been dead since the 70s, but she liked to go there. Said she could hear music from inside when the wind hit the metal right." Ethan stood, his decision instant. "I'm heading there now. It's less than a mile, right?" Helen's hand gripped his sleeve. "Please, if you find her, I'll bring her home," he said simply. Outside, night had settled. The moon hung low and sharp, silvering the snow. Rex moved ahead, his paws leaving prints like dark stamps on the frozen ground. They reached the radio tower after 15 minutes, a skeletal structure of rust and ice looming over the ridge. The wind moaned through its hollow ribs, carrying faint echoes like whispers. At the base, Ethan found fresh tracks. 2 sets of boots, one smaller than his own, the other heavy and wide. The smaller prints stopped near the entrance to a maintenance hatch. The larger continued toward the woods. He knelt, brushing away snow to reveal something glinting half-buried, a charm bracelet with a small engraved E. Emily. He pocketed it carefully. "She was here, Rex." The dog sniffed the air, tail low, ears rigid. Then he barked once, short, sharp, alerting Ethan to movement near the tree line. A faint flashlight beam flickered once, then went dark. Ethan drew his sidearm, advancing quietly through the snow. Rex flanked left, silent as shadow. The forest beyond the tower was dense, branches heavy with frost. Then came a sound, soft, deliberate crunching of snow underfoot. Ethan pressed his back against a pine trunk, signaling Rex to stay. Through the branches, a figure emerged, tall, wrapped in a long coat, face hidden by a scarf and hood. He carried a heavy duffel bag that clinked faintly with metal inside. Ethan stepped out, weapon steady. "Federal authority, drop the bag." The man froze. Then, instead of surrendering, he tossed something small into the snow, an object that blinked red once before emitting a deafening crack. A flash bang. Ethan flinched, disoriented. By the time his vision cleared, the man was gone, his tracks swallowed by drifting snow. Rex barked frantically, racing toward the edge of the woods where faint headlights flared and vanished down a hidden road. Ethan knelt, cursing under his breath, and looked down at the snow where the flashbang had landed. There, Half melted from the heat was a small metal disc etched with a logo, a serpent coiled around a satellite dish. Ethan's pulse quickened. He'd seen that insignia once before. Classified archives, black ops funding, unauthorized tech experiments. The code name had been the Chimera Directive. He stood in the freezing wind, the tower creaking behind him, the serpent emblem glinting faintly in his hand. Rex pressed close to his leg, growling low, eyes fixed on the direction the vehicle had gone. "Looks like we just woke the wrong ghosts," Ethan muttered, and then faintly, through the radio in his pocket, came a voice he hadn't heard in years, a distorted whisper under layers of static. "Ethan, if you can hear me, she's alive." The signal cut out. The next morning broke gray and hollow, the kind of winter light that never truly woke the world. Frost glazed the windows of Helen Harper's cabin, turning every breath inside into fog. Ethan sat by the table, poring over the metal disc he'd found, the serpent coiled around a satellite dish, its edges scorched from the flashbang. Rex lay at his feet, head on his paws, eyes half closed but ears twitching every few seconds. Sleep hadn't come easy for either of them. That voice over the radio, "She's alive," was playing on repeat in Ethan's mind like a command he couldn't shake. Helen brought him coffee, her hands trembling slightly. She hadn't said much since last night, but her eyes carried both fear and hope. "Do you think it was her?" she asked quietly. "Emily?" Ethan looked up. "Could be. Or someone wants us to think it was." He stood, pulling on his tactical jacket. "The signal came from an active node, not the old tower. That means there's another relay nearby, probably in the industrial zone by the East Ridge." He pointed to the map spread across the table. "If this Chimera group is still operational, that's where they'd hide. Underground, out of sight, using the cold to mask their heat signatures." Helen hesitated. "That area's off limits. Old refinery. My husband used to say there were tunnels under it. Cold War relics." Ethan nodded grimly. "Then that's where I'll start." He turned to Rex. "Ready, partner?" The dog rose immediately, tail stiff, silent as a shadow. By noon, they reached the edge of the Port Haven refinery complex, a ruin of rusted tanks and broken pipes stretching along the frozen shoreline. The wind keened through the hollow shells, scattering flecks of snow like ash. Ethan scanned the perimeter with his thermal scope. Nothing. But Rex was uneasy. The dog's fur bristled as he sniffed the air, then trotted toward a collapsed section of wall. Beneath it, half buried under ice and gravel, was a steel door marked with faded yellow letters. "Authorized personnel only." Ethan cleared the debris and forced the hatch open. A stale rush of air escaped, carrying the smell of oil and decay. He switched on his flashlight and descended the metal ladder, Rex following carefully. The corridor below was narrow, lined with pipes and broken wires that hummed faintly. After 50 feet, the tunnel opened into a small underground chamber, a signal room. Banks of outdated computers lined the walls, their monitors dark. A generator hummed weakly in the corner. And at the center sat a man, slumped over a desk, his head resting on his folded arms. Ethan approached cautiously, weapon raised. "Sir, can you hear me?" The man stirred with a groan, then lifted his head. His face was gaunt, skin pale from lack of sunlight, his beard streaked gray. His hair hung in damp clumps over sharp cheekbones. He blinked against the flashlight, then winced at the sight of Ethan's badge. "You're military," he rasped. "Former," Ethan said. And you are? The man exhaled shakily. Name's Dr. Owen Marks. Used to be a communications engineer for the Navy. Now, just a ghost in a bunker. Ethan lowered his gun slightly. Marks looked mid-50s, once broad-shouldered but worn down by isolation. His fingers, though shaking, were long and precise. The hands of someone who built delicate things and regretted most of them. "What is this place?" Ethan asked. Marks gave a weak laugh. "It was supposed to be a listening post, Cold War project. But Chimera found it years ago. They repurposed the old network to test long-range encrypted transmissions. I built part of it." His eyes flicked toward Rex. "Didn't think they'd send a SEAL to clean up my mess." Ethan's pulse quickened. "You worked with them?" "I designed the relay algorithm they're using," Marks admitted. "But I didn't know what it was for until it was too late. They're not broadcasting to the sea, they're sending data inland to a staging hub. Smuggled cargo manifests, personnel lists, and one classified package labeled Directive Alpha, Human Assets." Ethan felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cold. "Human assets," Marks nodded. "They're moving people, using abandoned shipping routes. Your missing girl, she's one of many." Rex suddenly growled, ears pricking toward the far wall. Ethan swept the light. There, behind a rack of cables, a hidden passage sloped downward. Marks followed his gaze. "That leads to the main lab. They use it for transmissions, but you should know, anyone who goes down there doesn't come back." Ethan turned to him. "You coming with us?" Marks hesitated, then grabbed a heavy coat from the chair. "I've been hiding too long." The three of them moved into the narrow passage. The deeper they went, the warmer the air became, unnatural, like standing near machinery. The tunnel opened into a cavern lit by pale blue lights. Along the walls were stacked crates, stamped with U.S. defense surplus. Some were open, revealing not weapons but communication drones, compact metal spheres with antennas like insect limbs. At the far end stood a reinforced glass room filled with humming servers. Inside, a single figure was working, a tall man in a black coat, his hair silver and neatly combed back, movements precise and mechanical. Even from behind, Ethan could tell this was no ordinary technician. Marks went pale. "That's Director Voss," he whispered, "head of Chimera's covert division. He was declared dead in 2010. Ethan motioned for silence. Through the glass, Voss typed commands into a console, the screens flickering with code. A holographic map projected above the desk. Dozens of red dots blinking across the Atlantic coast. Ethan recognized one of them, Port Haven. Rex's low growl vibrated against his leg. Ethan raised his weapon, ready to breach, when Voss suddenly turned, eyes meeting his through the glass. They were pale blue, cold, almost luminescent. A faint smile curved his lips as he reached for a switch on the console. Marks shouted, "No!" A high-pitched tone filled the chamber. The lights flickered violently. The drones in the crates began to hum, rising into the air one by one, their antennas glowing red. Voss's voice crackled through the intercom. "Welcome to the signal, Lieutenant. You've already joined the network." Ethan fired at the glass, but the bullet ricocheted harmlessly off reinforced plating. Sparks rained down as the drones ignited. Marks grabbed Ethan's arm. "They're self-synchronizing. We have to shut down the main server." Ethan dove toward the control panel outside the room, Rex barking wildly. He ripped open the access panel, exposing a mess of colored wires. "Which one?" Marks pointed. "Blue and white! Cut them both!" The hum rose to a scream. Ethan's knife sliced through the wires, and the lights went out. The chamber fell into blackness. Only the glow of emergency strobes remained, painting the walls in blood-red pulses. The drones dropped lifeless to the floor with metallic thuds, but when the smoke cleared, the glass room was empty. Voss was gone. Marks leaned against the wall, panting. He triggered a backup uplink. The data is already transmitted. Ethan grabbed his radio, tuning to the encrypted frequency. Static. Then a faint voice, the same one as before, came through. "Ethan, they're moving her island facility north of the strait." And then silence. Ethan looked at Rex, whose amber eyes gleamed in the dim light. "We're not done yet," he said quietly. "We're going to bring her back." Outside, the blizzard began again, erasing their tracks as the signal room went dark. The helicopter cut through the gray morning sky like a blade, its rotors scattering loose snow across the frozen coastline. Ethan Cole sat strapped beside the open door, headset pressed tight to his ears, eyes fixed on the endless expanse of ice breaking into the Atlantic. Across from him, Dr. Owen Marks worked feverishly on a rugged laptop, wires snaking from the screen into a small black transceiver clamped to the bulkhead. The air inside the chopper smelled of oil, static, and anticipation. Rex, braced between Ethan's boots, stared out the open door, his ears twitching with every gust of wind. His breath steamed white, his fur ruffled by the draft, but his gaze remained sharp, waiting for the signal. The pilot, Lieutenant Brooke Hayes, was a woman in her mid-30s, with short black hair slicked back under a flight helmet, her profile hard and angular, like a statue carved from steel. Her voice over the comms was crisp but not unkind. "Approaching target radius. No visual yet. You sure about these coordinates, Marks?" Marks didn't look up. His gaunt face was lit blue by the glow of the screen. "Positive. The transmission bounce originated here, an island that doesn't exist on any chart." Brooke gave a dry laugh. "Perfect. Just what I love. Ghost geography." Ethan checked his rifle, the cold metal grounding him. He'd been in too many operations that began with uncertainty and ended in blood. Yet this one felt different. Emily Harper wasn't just a civilian. She was a child caught in a war she never chose. And somewhere on that island, the man who started all this, Director Voss, was waiting. The helicopter descended into a low fog bank. Through the haze, the island emerged, a dark mass of cliffs and industrial ruins ringed by crashing waves. Smoke rose from chimneys that shouldn't have existed, blending with the mist until sky and ground became one. The place looked half alive, half fossilized, a scar left over from an era no one remembered. "LZ in sight," Brooke called. "You've got 5 minutes on the ground before the storm front hits." Ethan nodded. "We'll make them count." They touched down on a cracked concrete platform. The air smelled of salt and metal, thick with the faint ozone of machinery. Rex leapt out first, landing silently. Ethan followed, sweeping the perimeter. The island was eerily quiet, except for the rhythmic hum beneath the ground, an engine deep and constant, like a heartbeat buried in rock. Marks jumped down, clutching his gear. "That's not power generation. It's data compression. They're transmitting again." Ethan gestured toward a narrow access tunnel cut into the cliffside. "That's our way in." They advanced quickly, their footsteps echoing through the dark corridor. Rusted pipes ran along the walls, dripping condensation. The deeper they went, the warmer it became. An artificial heat, the kind that came from machines running too long. At the first junction, they found signs of habitation, cots, crates of canned food, a portable generator, and in one corner, a map pinned to the wall with hand-drawn markings, arrows, routes, numbers. Ethan recognized a few of the coordinates. They pointed to coastal towns all across New England, each marked asset extraction. Marks's voice was hoarse. They're moving people from multiple locations, selling them to contractors. This isn't just a smuggling ring, it's a logistics operation. Rex suddenly barked twice, sharp and focused. Ethan spun, rifle raised. A man stepped out of the shadows, hands raised. He was tall and wiry, late 20s, dressed in a stained maintenance uniform. His eyes were wide but clear. "Don't shoot, please. I'm not one of them." Ethan studied him. "Name?" "Jacob Flint," the man stammered. "Engineer. They brought me here 2 months ago. Said I'd be helping maintain communications arrays. But it's not communication, it's control. They're running some kind of neural feedback test. People strapped to machines, their minds—" He stopped, shaking. "You don't want to see it." Marks grabbed his shoulder. "Where are they keeping the subjects?" Flint swallowed hard. "Central Lab, South Wing, through the freight tunnel. But it's sealed. You'll need an access key." He pulled a key card from his pocket, trembling. "I was supposed to scrub data after each upload. I couldn't do it anymore." Ethan took the card. "You did the right thing." They moved as a unit through the tunnels, the sound of machinery growing louder. Steam hissed from vents, and fluorescent lights flickered above them in a steady pulse. At the end of the corridor loomed a reinforced door marked with faded stenciling. Project Chimera Directive. Authorized personnel only. Rex sniffed the air, tail low, ears back. A low whine escaped his throat. Ethan could feel the tension vibrating off him. "Yeah," he muttered, "I feel it too." Marks swiped the key card. The lock disengaged with a hiss. The door opened into a cavernous chamber that looked like a cross between a data center and a medical facility. Dozens of pods lined the walls, transparent coffin-like capsules filled with blue light. Inside each, a person lay motionless, cables running from their heads into the ceiling. Machines hummed softly, rhythmically. It was a mechanical symphony of control. Jacob Flint's voice cracked. They said they were building neural relays, ways to transmit data through human brainwaves. But those are people. God, those are— He stopped, eyes locking on one of the pods. Inside was a young woman with auburn hair floating gently in the fluid, her face serene, her fingers twitching faintly as though she dreamed. Helen's daughter, Emily Harper. Ethan froze. "She's alive," he whispered. Marks moved closer, checking the monitors. "She's in a low-frequency synchronization loop. If we cut power too fast, we could fry her neural link." Before Ethan could respond, alarms erupted. Red lights flooded the chamber. Over the intercom came that familiar cold voice. "Lieutenant Cole, you've come a long way. Leave her. She belongs to the network now." It was Voss. The glass pods began to pulse, the liquid inside vibrating violently. Emily's eyes fluttered open, dazed, unfocused. Ethan shouted over the noise, "Marks, can you pull her out?" "I can override the system, but it'll trigger a purge sequence." "Do it!" Ethan barked. Mark's fingers flew across the console. Sparks rained from the ceiling as power conduits overloaded. Rex barked furiously, running to the doorway where footsteps echoed. Armed guards black uniforms, faces covered. Ethan grabbed his rifle, covering marks as the first shots cracked through the air. The smell of cordite filled the room. Bullets shattered glass pods. Alarm screamed. "Now!" Ethan yelled. Marks slammed the final key. The pod doors released with a hiss, blue liquid spilling across the floor. Emily collapsed forward, unconscious. Ethan caught her in his arms, the cables snapping free from her temples. Her skin was cold, but she was breathing. Rex lunged, taking down one of the guards, his jaws locking onto the man's arm. Ethan fired 3 rounds into another's chest, dragging Emily behind a console. Mark shouted, "We have to move! The purge will detonate the power core!" They raced through the tunnel as sirens wailed. Steam burst from pipes. The floor shook under their feet. Behind them, a shock wave thundered, the lab collapsing in a bloom of white fire. Outside, the storm had become a hurricane of ice. The helicopter was gone. Only the roaring sea waited below the cliff. Ethan clutched Emily close, Rex pressed against his leg, Marks struggling beside him. They were trapped. Then, through the blizzard, the beam of a searchlight cut through the night. A second helicopter approaching low, dark, and unmarked. Ethan raised his weapon instinctively. Through the loudspeaker came a single phrase, calm and deliberate. "Stand down, Lieutenant Cole. We've been expecting you." The black helicopter hovered over the cliff's edge, blades slicing through the snowstorm with a thunderous rhythm that echoed off the frozen sea. Ethan Cole shielded Emily with his body, his rifle raised, eyes narrowing against the glare of the searchlight. Rex stood beside him, teeth bared, his fur slick with sleet. The voice from the loudspeaker repeated, cold and deliberate. "Stand down, Lieutenant. We've been expecting you." The side door of the chopper opened, revealing a figure in a dark overcoat, face obscured by snow and shadow. A woman's voice cut through the storm. "Ethan Cole, your fight isn't with us. Get the girl aboard, now!" Ethan didn't move. "Identify yourself," he shouted. The woman stepped into the light. She was tall, mid-40s, with pale skin and cropped silver-blonde hair that whipped across her face. Her expression was calm, but her eyes, gray and sharp as broken ice, carried the weight of command. "Director Lena Ward, Central Intelligence. We've been tracking Chimera for years. You've just blown open their entire operation." Marks stared in disbelief. "Ward? I thought you were dead." "Officially," she replied flatly. "Now get on board before that island finishes sinking." The cliffs beneath them were already crumbling, the shock waves from the explosion tearing through the frozen ground. Ethan glanced at the flames licking the horizon, the remnants of the Chimera facility still burning through snow and steel. "Rex, heel!" he barked. The dog obeyed instantly, circling back to his side. He helped Marks and the unconscious Emily into the helicopter, then climbed in last. As soon as the door shut, Ward gave the pilot a sharp nod. The chopper lurched upward, rising through the storm toward the dull light of dawn. Inside, the cabin was dim except for the glow of control panels. Emily lay across a bench, her breathing shallow but steady. Her skin had regained some warmth, the color slowly returning to her lips. Marks attached a portable monitor to her wrist, muttering, "Pulse normal. Whatever they did to her, it's stabilizing." Ward removed her gloves and sat across from Ethan. Up close, her face was carved by fatigue, thin lines of sleepless years etched into her skin. "You've done something extraordinary, Lieutenant. You stopped a global trafficking network and uncovered tech we didn't even know existed." Ethan met her gaze. "And Voss? He's still out there." Ward's expression darkened. We intercepted fragments of his uplink before the base went under. He's heading for the mainland, probably to erase what's left of Chimera's trail. She paused. We can help you finish this, but we need your testimony and your cooperation. Ethan leaned forward. No more bureaucracy. You want my help? We do it my way. Ward smirked faintly. I figured you'd say that. Rex shifted, growling softly. His ears pricked toward the cockpit. A red light flickered on the console. Incoming signal. Brooke Hayes, still at the controls, frowned. We've got company. 2 bogies on radar, closing fast. Through the side window, Ethan saw them. 2 dark aircraft slicing through the mist. Smaller, faster, unmarked. Chimera's pursuit drones. Hold on! Brooke shouted. She banked hard left, the helicopter shaking violently. The first missile streaked past, exploding in the cliffs below. The blast lit up the storm like lightning. Ethan braced himself, gripping the side rail. They're trying to finish what they started. Ward pulled a headset from her coat. We can't outfly them. We'll have to jam their guidance systems. Marks! The older man was already moving. On it. He connected his laptop to the chopper's signal relay, fingers flying over the keyboard. I can scramble their radar, but I'll need a few seconds. Rex barked, pawing at the floor. Ethan followed his gaze. Emily had stirred. Her eyelids fluttered open, pupils dilated, voice weak but clear. Where's my mom? Ethan squeezed her hand. She's safe. You're safe now. The second missile streaked closer. Brooke swore. That was their warning shot. Next one's not. Got it! Mark shouted. He slammed the enter key. A burst of static filled the cabin as the radar jammers activated. Outside, the drones veered off course, one spiraling out of control into the sea, the other pulled up sharply, disappearing into the fog. For a long moment, there was only the sound of the storm and the steady whir of rotors. Then Brooke exhaled shakily. We're clear, heading back to mainland. Ward turned to Ethan. You realize what this means? Chimera wasn't just experimenting with data. They were turning people into signal carriers, living conduits. If we don't find Voss, he'll rebuild somewhere else. Ethan looked down at Rex, who rested his head against his knee, eyes heavy with exhaustion, but alert. Then we don't stop until he can't rebuild anything. The helicopter landed hours later at a coastal airbase outside Boston. The storm had passed, leaving a bleak gray calm in its wake. Medical personnel rushed forward, taking Emily on a stretcher. Helen Harper was there, wrapped in a heavy coat, her face pale with disbelief. When she saw her daughter, her legs gave out. Ethan caught her before she fell. She's alive, he said softly. She made it. Helen's eyes filled with tears. Thank you, God, thank you. Rex nosed her hand gently, tail wagging once before sitting at Ethan's side. The woman reached down, stroking his fur. You brought her home. Later, as night settled over the base, Ethan stood alone outside the hangar, staring toward the horizon. The sky was streaked with red and gold, the last light of the storm fading into dusk. Ward approached quietly, a folder in her hand. We recovered something from the debris, she said. Inside were photos, Voss on the deck of a cargo ship, coordinates scrawled on the back, Arctic route, 50 Zemvesk north. Ward's tone was low. We can send a team, or you can lead it. Ethan didn't hesitate. We finish it. She nodded, almost smiling. You and that dog, you really don't stop. He looked down at Rex. The shepherd's fur shimmered in the dim light, his eyes bright and steady. No, we don't. The wind from the sea picked up, carrying the scent of salt and iron. Somewhere in the distance, a beacon flashed across the dark waters, a lighthouse rebuilt after decades of silence. Its beam swept across the shore, steady and unbroken. Ethan watched it for a long moment, then turned away. "Let's go home, partner," Rex barked once, a low, contented sound. Together, they walked into the fading light, the storm finally behind them, but the mission still alive, because some wars, the quiet ones, never truly end. When the storms pass and the noise fades, what remains isn't the sound of war or fear. It's the whisper of grace. Because sometimes miracles don't arrive in lightning or thunder. They come quietly, in a loyal dog who refuses to give up, in a soldier who still believes there's light beyond the darkness, in a mother's prayer that crosses oceans and finds its way home. Maybe that's God's way of reminding us. Faith isn't about what we see, but what we hold on to when everything else is gone. So if you're watching this tonight, wherever you are, take a moment to thank the one who watches over every storm, every tear, every lost soul that still dares to hope. May God bless you and your loved ones. If this story touched your heart, please share it so others can feel its light too. Tell us in the comments where you're watching from. We love seeing how far these miracles travel. And don't forget to subscribe for more true stories of faith, courage, and the unbreakable bond between man, dog, and heaven's quiet hand.